Hi, everyone. Welcome to Easy FIU. Today I have Abraham Anderson today. And Abraham, you're only 25 years old. Yes.
That's correct, Elisa.
Awesome. So Abraham, who is 25 years old, already own 11 mobile home parks and the over 600 pads. So that's amazing, accomplishment for such a young age. So I'm really glad to see Abraham because we started knowing each other like a couple of years ago, and then just kind of be able to see his journey of growing step by step. So welcome to our show today, Abraham.
Thanks so much, Elisa. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So we wanted to kind of go back, because a lot of our listeners probably going to wonder, how did this guy who's 25 years old and accomplish so much? When I was 25, I was still partying in the college, right? Canada college, so it takes a little longer. So was really wondering if you can unwind and unpack it for us about your upbringing. What is the one thing or one person that had a major influence to your entrepreneur spirit?
Sure, and that's a great question because it definitely started at childhood. My mother was a huge influence on me. I was homeschooled, so one of my earliest memories about money is I was in a grocery store with her, and I picked up some toy and said, "Mom, can we buy this?" And she said, "No, it's not on sale." So I just put it back. I thought not on sale meant it wasn't for sale, that you couldn't buy it.
Oh.
But she just meant she couldn't get a discount. So yeah, all throughout my life, really, and all my time at home was about, okay, you need to save money and you need to work hard. So that was really instilled into me. And I never went to college. As soon as I turned 18, the first thing I did is started selling insurance with my dad. That's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do that part-time, but now I'm mainly into real estate. So yeah, definitely values of saving money and working hard. And then I kind of just picked up the investing along the way.
Yeah, gotcha. And so you mentioned about your dad selling insurance. So that's like an early business influence because you probably see him going in and out. Being a salesman, it's not really a regular job. If you're a really good salesman, you're not working regular hours. Obviously you're also paid on commission. So it's a little bit different than a stable W-2 job, which is full-time job for listeners who are not in US. Did that kind of give you an influence? Like, what's your earliest memory about, hey, like maybe W-2 was just never in the books, but what is the kind of like the earliest time when you realize like, hey, working for myself is gonna have unlimited potentials?
Sure. It's funny because it's another early memory from my mom. When I was probably 7, maybe even younger, I told my mom, I said, when I get older, I'm going to be a cartoonist. I love cartoons. That's what I want to do is draw cartoons.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you can't do that. You have to sell insurance like your dad. Said if your dad was a bum and didn't have a career, then you can do whatever you want, but you got to sell insurance like your dad.
So it's like ingrained into the family business. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's why I've got 4 siblings and all of them have done insurance at one time.
Gotcha.
Some of them still do, but it was, yeah. So, and also I kind of resented being homeschooled at first, but by the time I got into high school, my dad said, "Hey, if you want it, you can go to public school or what have you." And I said, I kind of like it because by that point I was already used to making my own schedule and and getting things done quickly. So as I was getting close to 18, and even before that, when I was 13, I used to work in my dad's office, helping him out with secretarial stuff. And how I made money as well was I used to go to yard sales with one of my older brothers, and we would spend all weekend mapping out yard sales. We would have, we'd try to find electronics, buy them very inexpensively, then resell them on eBay to make money.
Yeah.
So, definitely early on, I was always thinking about how can I, make money and save it. And, I never really, and even especially when I started really making money when I was selling insurance, I didn't know why I was working this hard. I'm thinking, what's the point of, making all this money and never spending any? And I thought, well, I don't think I'll ever regret working hard. I might regret it if I spent my time, chasing girls or partying or something like that. But I'll never regret working hard. So
Yeah.
I'm still not sure why I'm working this hard, but I enjoy it. So
Yeah. Because there's some joys. I think from outside in, people look at it, they're like, why would you be working so hard? Because to them, the enjoyment maybe mean stay on the couch watching TV or something, right? But they didn't really quite understand once you kind of get the entrepreneur bug, the people who gets that, it's like it's the challenge that kind of keeps you going. Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So you probably had a lot of experience. I love the story because I have a young kid, well, two young kids, and I understand you're on the way to be a dad as well. Congrats.
Thank you.
And then there's a lot to kind of think about in terms of the life that we wanted to present to them and bring them up as such. So tell me a little bit about your other sibling. This is just for my personal interest to see, like did they kind of grow up to be entrepreneurs, most of them as well? Because I'm assuming it's pretty similar upbringing.
Yeah, it's funny because we all had, we were all raised the same. We were all homeschooled, but I'm most similar to my oldest brother, who also does insurance, and he also got into real estate as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 16 years older than me, so by the time I was born, he was already pretty much almost out of the house.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but we both, it's kind of funny, we got on similar paths, just I guess from similar upbringing. But my other three siblings are pretty different. One's in the military. Another one was working at a W-2 job. Another one did insurance for a while, and they're doing other things now. So
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. My dad told me once, it's really strange. I raised you all the same, but you all turned out pretty different, except you and your oldest brother.
Yeah.
So I guess that,
yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's very interesting. That's awesome. So fast forward a little bit. You mentioned investment is something that you kind of started yourself. Now, what is that kind of pivotal point? Because I recognize that, our parents teach us the dollar value. Like, what is the value of a dollar? Like, what it can buy. Usually it start from frugalities and etc. And then the investment concept for most people I interview over here is something self-taught. So when is that big transition moment for you when you realize like, saving money is not the only solution? I got like invest as well.
Sure. So I really started some of my, when in insurance, I mainly focused on the senior market, 65 and up. And really it was kind of depressing because I would run into a lot of people, and some of them were doing fairly well, but majority of them just had no savings, had no investments, nothing. And they were just living on Social Security, which is sometimes not even $1,000 a month, nothing else to their name.
Yeah.
That was really eye-opening, thinking, man, these people worked their entire lives and they've got really nothing investment-wise to show for it. And some of them, they were still fine. I mean, they were getting along, but I mean, that I wanted more than that, And so I realized with insurance, and it's a little bit similar to real estate in some ways because you get some renewals, but also I realized even your best clients eventually pass away or eventually will switch to a different company. You don't get those renewals anymore.
Yeah.
And just from listening to podcasts and different forms of investment, I was looking at real estate, that's something that never goes away.
Right.
Every year it gets better because you pay down the loan and rents go up and you get the tax benefits. And so it was from listening to podcasts. And then also I had another early, I'm not sure if you call him mentor, influence on me. I had a friend whose dad was a contractor and he had a handful of rentals. And when I was like 13 or 14, I remember talking to him. I said, I want to do what you're doing. So eventually I want to get rentals. Yeah. And I didn't think you could even start in that. I thought that's something you do after you make money somewhere else. But he said, well, when you have $50,000, let me know. So before I turned 19, I'd worked almost a year in insurance. I'd saved up $50,000. I went to him, and the first thing I did was a new construction flip of a fourplex. It was 4 townhomes, and I was going to keep them as rentals, but I ended up moving away from that area, and I ended up selling those. So that was kind of my foray into investing.
Did you wish you kept these?
I have thought about that a lot because I followed them recently. I looked and they were selling for, oh man, like 50,000 each more than I had sold them for.
Yeah.
But when I look at it, and that's the only property I've ever sold. When I sold those, I took the money and I bought a 20-unit apartment complex where I moved to. So I really don't regret it because I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I wish I could buy them all, but in that case, I don't regret it.
And there's so much to unpack on that particular scenario. It's like, okay, yes. And then this is probably 4 or 5 years ago when you sold it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically in 5 years, that 50,000, like look at these essentially single family home, but they're like fourplexes. They're better than single family. But they were sold only $50,000 more after 5 years. But yet you were able to harvest the power of leveraging probably 1031 into a 20-unit property, and then be able to grow that exponentially right there. So, that's a big, I think, a jump. Someone can kind of take that lesson and then understand the time value essentially
Hmm.
to things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's one reason I don't regret it, just because of using that money to get into a true multifamily property above
Mhm.
five
Yeah,
units, or five and up. And
yeah,
so I agree 100%. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a lot to really scale.
How did you learn about podcast? How did you like stumble upon your first podcast? So first, people who are going through discovery journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to, and I still do, listen to a lot of YouTube videos. I didn't even really understand what podcasts were, where they came from. I learned later as an Apple invention, or
Hmm.
Steve Jobs,
Yeah.
but or at least the name. So I would listen to different podcasts on YouTube, and that was kind of nice. So as I was, because I did tons of driving, everything I did was face to face with
Mm,
insurance. So sometimes I would
gotcha.
drive 4 or 5 hours a day,
Hmm.
and the whole time I wouldn't listen to music. I would just listen to podcasts. That's
Yeah.
all, different podcasts, mainly real estate. I just somehow gravitated towards that. I guess from early influences, people I knew that owned rentals, that I knew
Hmm.
that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's YouTube, and then I found dedicated podcast apps, and I really ramped it up.
That's awesome. So going down the rabbit hole, and then we know like a lot of our listener or students, they kind of going on this exploration journey, but you actually also took the action towards it. So can you walk us around the earlier years when you were going through the kind of listening to the podcast, and then probably got exposed to different types of real estate, because there's gazillion ways to make money in real estate, and then kind of like narrow down to like, this is the focus where I want to get into
Sure.
a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started with the fourplex, I really did not know what I was doing, other than just signing the checks and
Hmm.
paying for the construction of them. To me, that wasn't even investing. I was just I was knew that I probably wouldn't regret building these, because I thought, well, once they're done, I'm renting them out. I'll be making
Yeah.
money. But I did not make hardly any money on that. Contractor went way over budget.
Hmm.
After everything was said and done, I made very little, but at least I didn't lose money. But with
Hmm.
the next properties after that, I started making money. So uh, my mind just went blank. Can you repeat the
Yeah.
question?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, but before you even buy the fourplex, did you just decide that, hey, opportunity kind of come up, I got to jump onto it? To your point, maybe you already know like this is where you want to go in, right? So there's an exploration period when you're listening to our podcast, getting yourself exposed to different type of investment, and finally make the action.
Hmm.
So what is that transition period for you? Did you even have such transition period when you went explore, and then you kind of set a goal or some timeline to yourself? I don't know. And then
Sure,
how did you decide gravitate towards the multifamily? Because fourplex is still multifamily is the way that I want
sure.
to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this is my lack of traditional schooling, but I was never afraid to take action. In my
Hmm.
mind, well, the worst I can do is lose money.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's funny though, even some, like, my parents were like, "What are you doing? This is not a good idea. You're going to lose all your money.
Yeah.
How are you going to manage? So you're going to be a landlord." And I knew that, well, there's so many people that are doing rentals, doing real estate. Everything has been done before. So if I get into a situation I can't figure it out, I'll find someone that's done it, and then I'll learn from there.
Hmm.
And I guess I was not comfortable every step of the way. Like, for example, when I sold my fourplex and then bought the 20 units,
Yeah.
I was terrified of self-managing. I just didn't know for some reason, my mind's like something I could not do. So
Hmm.
I hired a property manager, and that didn't work out. I felt like they weren't doing a very good job. Got rid
Hmm.
of them. Got a different property manager. That didn't work out. And some of the things was, like, I would have a unit ready to go, and it would be 2 weeks, and they hadn't even listed it. And so
Oh yeah. Yeah.
when I sat down and looked at everything that they were supposed to be doing, I realized, my gosh, I can do this.
Yeah.
So after the second property management work, I just self-managed after that, and I figured that part of it out. Figured out
Hmm.
the eviction part of it, and once I realized all these are just skills that you can learn, you can do it. If I can
Hmm.
do it, you can do it.
Hmm.
That really gave me the boldness to just keep going from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So investment confidence, and also sprinkle with some failure in your earlier investment journey. So that kind of got you over the hump of, well, it's difficult, but we still kind of made money. So, like the hard work can kind of translate into value. And then so moving forward, so why did you switch to mobile home park? Now, coming back to your kind of investment, like your major investment right now, it's a mobile home park. So why did you start it with, like, why did you decide to start mobile home park?
Sure. So I just listen to lots of podcasts. I stumbled upon a couple mobile home park related podcasts, and even going to different apartment events. They had
Hmm.
mobile home park people there.
Yeah.
And my first reactions always, oh, I don't want to buy a trailer park. They're,
Yeah.
all the stereotypes. And so I just always avoided them. And then I don't know when it really clicked, the exact moment, but with apartments, the two biggest headaches for me were always the turnover, which could cost, upwards of a couple grand, depending on how
Hmm.
bad they trash it, and the
Right.
ongoing repair and maintenance. It's like
Right.
no matter how hard I tried, I'd get everything completely filled up, and then someone would run off in the middle of the night, have to
Right.
rehab another one, get them in.
Yeah.
And really, looking back, if I just, I needed more apartments. That's how you get around it. Then you hire your own, company manager, and then you have them do all these things versus a third party one. And there's ways to around it, do it with apartments. But when I started looking at parks, my whole thing is I'm in this to make money. And when I
Hmm.
was looking at the returns of some of these mobile home parks, you look at some deals that are at a 10 cap. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, what am I doing? I need to be focusing on parks.
Yeah.
So it was about 6 months of listening to them, like early 2018. And then about the middle of 2018, I just said, okay, I'm going to focus on nothing but finding a mobile home park. And it was
Yeah.
about a year later until I actually first got my first park.
Hmm. Yeah. And then what did you do with these apartment buildings?
So I still have them.
Hmm.
I thought about selling them, but they're making money. They're pretty stabilized now. And I actually have now a district manager for my parks, and she also manages my apartments.
Hmm.
So I still have them. And really, I guess what drew me to parks was those two big headaches from apartments, the turnover and repair and maintenance.
Hmm.
With parks, to me, the biggest appeal was they own their home. So you're just renting them land. You don't
Hmm.
have to do their repair. You don't have to fix their toilets or their broken
But
windows and anything. And also, if they own their home, then the average person stays upwards of 10 years versus with
mhm.
apartments, it's every, 12 to 24 months.
But
So that really solved to me the biggest headache with apartments. And also, depending on the deal you get and all that, the returns
mhm.
can be higher.
Yeah. And then so at all the while when you bought the apartments and then now going to mobile home parks, did you try to scale back your hours at selling insurance? Because that's kind of your daytime job, right? Like when did that transition happen? When
That happened just earlier this year. And I guess that's the benefit of being self-employed because you kind of set your own schedule and you can do it as much or as little as you want. And
hmm
just as kind of a mindset, I'd rather work 80 hours for myself than 40 hours for somebody else.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I've never had a W-2 job. There's nothing wrong with it. It's
yeah.
just I guess the way my mindset is. And so as I started getting more and more properties, I just started scaling back the
Scaling back.
insurance. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I probably split up now 4 days a week or more of real estate, and then 1 day a week of doing insurance.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And why do you still keep that? The insurance?
Maybe it's just nostalgia. I don't even
Because we
seek out.
know that you have reached your FI, you don't actually have to, sell insurance. Yeah.
Sure, and really, I'm not even out looking for any new clients with it. I'm just maintaining my
Mm-hmm.
current book of business. So
Gotcha.
that's not a ton of work to do that, and I still like talking to some of my clients, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So even as they refer me to other people, which happens, usually every week, I'll just give them to another agent that I used to work with, and they run them. And so yeah, really, I'm pretty much full into real estate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And so these mobile home parks, so tell us a little bit about actually, I want to kind of go back to your 20 unit. How
Mhm.
did you get this done? Because everybody's been struggling between going from a residential property, which is 4 units or less, to a commercial property because you need to get a new loan, you have a different team, and then going from 4 to 20 is not a job. Like 4 to 5, you still have to go through a whole hurdle. but like 4 to 20, it's not a small jump. You have to kind of revamp some of your systems and etc. So how did you go from that? And then what is the biggest challenge, would you say?
Yeah, and it was, I think number one was credibility.
Hmm.
At the time, I think I was 21. Yeah, I was 21.
Yes,
And, yeah.
that doesn't really help. Yes.
No, yeah. And it was funny because, I would talk to these brokers and they'd be like, okay, well, I'll add you to my mailing list or something. That would never get any
Yeah.
deals. And I talked to everyone. That was the thing. And that's really, I think the key to it is just persistence. Every broker, I called them all up. Hey, this is what I'm looking for. I've got money, and two things that really helped me as far as with credibility. One is putting together a credibility book, just showing why I can do this. And I did these other apartments before. I have money from insurance. I'm successful at that.
Hmm.
I have some experience with that. And the other was going to a bank and getting a pre-approval letter showing
Right.
what you're qualified to borrow.
Right.
Because if you think about it from a broker's perspective, their main concern is that you get the deal closed, because
Hmm.
they don't make any money unless you actually perform. So
Right.
that's their biggest concern. You got to hammer to them and show why you can get the deal closed, and then they'll show it to you versus somebody else. And how
Hmm.
I found the 20-unit deal in particular, I was walking out of my doctor's office one day and I noticed there was a real estate agency next door to it in this little strip mall. So
Yeah.
I just walked in there and I was like, hey, I'm looking for apartments. Do y'all have any for sale? And I talked to the lady and she took me seriously, right away. And
Yeah.
so she was constantly looking at things and sending them to me. And it was after several months, she found this 20 unit, and it was kind of off market because the broker that got it was friends with the owner. She was a residential broker, not an apartment broker. And
Hmm.
she listed them on an MLS in one county, like 2 counties away. So it wasn't even showing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what you're looking for, you wouldn't have even seen it.
Yeah.
And so that we talked to them, that took months and months because it went under contract to someone else. They backed out. I don't know what happened, whether they couldn't get financing or what. And then we reapproached them and we finally got a deal worked out there. And if I could, there's one other story I was wanting to share with a
Yeah.
broker I thought was kind of funny. I met this one broker. He had, I think it was either 30 or 40 unit property listed. I
Yeah.
called him on the phone, spoke with him, made an appointment. When I show up, I meet him, his face just dropped because I
Yeah.
guess I could tell, you know, you expect someone older.
Yeah.
So as we went along, though, I could tell he started taking more seriously. And we went out to dinner after we looked at the property. And he says, Abraham, I got to be honest. When you first showed up, I thought to myself, is this a joke? And, but he said, I'm impressed. He said, when I was your age, I was just thinking about the next time I could get drunk.
Yeah. That's
So,
yeah. Oh yeah,
uh,
totally. Ageism is such a big thing in this industry, especially in the commercial places, because people think you have to be certain age in order to accomplish what you have. But once you kind of get over that hurdle, everybody gets really excited because they feel like there's a hope. When it's just like us looking at babies, there's always hope
mhm.
on like it going so far. So people are willing to help you with that. So you talked about talking with everybody in town. Like, were you calling them every single week? Like, what is it like, kind of like a balance of calling them and hitting them up before it gets annoying, or does it
Sure.
ever get annoying? Yeah.
Well, nowadays, I would say if you haven't had the door slammed in your face, or if you haven't been cussed out and hung up on once this week, then you're not trying hard enough.
Hmm. Yeah.
But when I first started, I was probably about once a month I would follow up, and that might be too long. It might have been every 2 weeks would have been ideal.
Right.
But at least once a month, I was cycling through them all, calling up, hey, still looking for these. If you had any deals come up,
Hmm.
what do you have? And just that constant contact,
Hmm.
because it's just like what I mainly do now is contacting owners directly. If you're not at the top of their mind whenever they're ready to sell, or in the broker's case, if you're not at the top of their mind when they have a property come up,
Hmm.
especially if you've never bought a deal from them before,
Yeah.
it's going to go to someone else, or they're just going to
Right.
list it. So you've
Right.
got to keep in contact. It's not just one call. You got to talk to people constantly. You got to get
Yeah.
your name out there and get in front of them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to go to somebody else. Especially in this market where the hardest thing is finding a good deal. The
Mhm.
lending is relatively easy compared to that. You really have to get out in front of these brokers or these sellers in order to make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. That's an awesome suggestion. And so, okay, so mobile home park, how did you find the first deal, and how did you kind of get into it?
Sure. The first deal was off market. It was a wholesale to me. I went to, and I still do, it's harder now because of COVID, but go to real estate meetups.
Mm,
And I would talk to everybody, tell them what I have, tell them what I'm looking for, what I'm doing. And one guy I met, he had, uh, his group had bought some apartments from this guy. And he said, hey, they've got a couple of parks and I can put you in touch with them. So he put me in touch with them, and that took still, that was, I think, January it was when I first started talking to that seller. And it wasn't until May that we actually ended up closing the deal. But we paid him a wholesale fee. And then, yeah, those were the first two parks. It was a 30 unit and a 13 unit in the
mhm,
house.
mhm. Gotcha. And now, of course, like you do all the other stuff, like what type of education did you do beforehand,
I
before you get
listened,
into?
sure. I listened to every single episode of every mobile home park podcast that was out there. And that's not even necessary to do all of that. I just, as I said, I drove a lot and I liked it. And I attended a mobile home park event with one of the industry guys. And that was really, it's funny because a lot of these events, I realize now, is not about the education, because
Mhm.
everything at that event I'd already pretty much heard throughout these podcasts. The main thing is just the networking.
Yeah,
And it's funny, I've kept in touch with some of these guys, and I'm actually buying a deal from one of them here, closing it
yeah,
next month. So
that's
that's the
awesome.
main thing of these events. But really, if you're low on money or you can't go to these events or can't afford it even, just listen to the podcast if you can. I
Yeah.
mean, I recommend the events wholeheartedly because of the networking. That's how we met, Elisa.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's not an obstacle. If money is the issue, it's not an obstacle. You can just listen to the free material, and that
Mhm.
gets you 80% of the way there.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, if you don't have money, buying a part becomes a little challenging. It can be done as well. So okay, so you got a deal with 30 and 16. Now, I heard financing is always the most difficult part. What did you use to finance the deal?
Yes, and it's funny because another to me plus with parks is seller financing is much more common.
Hmm.
Out of the 11 parks I've got right now, all except for I believe 3 of them have had some form of seller financing with them.
Hmm.
So with financing, I went back to the bank I had the apartments with,
Hmm.
and I didn't even start with them. I talked with probably a dozen banks at least, and
Hmm.
I had I think 2 that were interested, and I ended up just going with the same bank that I had
Hmm.
used initially because their terms were pretty competitive. But it's so that's one thing I would say is definitely a plus for apartments versus parks is every bank, any bank will do apartments. There's
Hmm.
some that just will not do parks.
Hmm.
And I can't think of any reason other than the stigma, because usually the banks that have done park loans love them because they
Hmm.
have the lowest default rate of any form of real estate. Parks
Right.
do. But is just going from 0 to 1 for the bank's perspective. Some of them never do. And and if they've never done a park loan, I won't even talk to them, even if they say
Hmm.
they're willing, because I don't want
Yeah.
to be their guinea pig.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I just talking to tons of banks, and then I've used them several times, and then just other banks that I've picked up along the way that I use for park deals. So it's just the same thing. It's like a funnel. Just talk to more and more banks until you get one
Hmm.
that's willing to do it.
Gotcha. And then so what did you use to fund the parts?
To fund them or to find
Because
them.
to fund them, like your down payments
Sure.
and etc. Because you
Yeah.
still own these 20 units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thankfully with the apartments, I bought them right. I managed them right. I guess once I took over the management, then it was
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
At least I think. Um,
Yeah.
Raise the rents, all the things you're supposed to do. Unload all the expenses you can, cut them down, increase efficiency. The big thing really with the apartments, they were in a really good location. The guy that we had purchased them from built them himself,
Hmm.
and the rents hadn't gone up pretty much since he built them 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So they were pretty low under market. And really, as just the other day, I was looking at market comps again. I try to revisit that every so often, and I'm still probably now almost as under market as he was when I bought them, because
Yeah.
there's been so much growth in this area.
Right.
So from a combination of increasing the net operating income, I was able to refinance and then pull out all my down payment and then even more on top of that than
Hmm.
I used to purchase it.
Hmm.
So with that money and then with savings I had accumulated over the couple of years since then from insurance, that's how I funded the parks.
Gotcha. Gotcha.